Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gertis. I'm just a professor trying to provide context, and usually it's about the war in Ukraine. Here, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. It's how Trump's tariffs are affecting things, including Apple Computer. Yeah, it's strange. It's only indirectly related to what's going on with China and even less directly related to what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. Okay, so, but it's still a very interesting storyline. So let's look at this. So Tim Cook of Apple Computer has to be beside himself. China produces 44% of the world's Apple, that's the fruit, and 100% of the Apple products like a MacBook or your iPhone or that sort of thing. And the tariffs that Trump introduced on Liberation Day, wow. Okay. So when Liberation Day hit on the 2nd of the month, the stock market dropped like a rock. And then when they said, okay, we're not going to do that, we're going to suspend that, the market went halfway back up. And then we went to other things like even last week, we saw that Trump was threatening tariffs on Europe, and that's not related to Apple, but the market also sagged again after threatening tariffs on Europe, 50% tariffs. And so the saga goes on and on. Here, Apple CEO Tim Cook has donated $1 million to the Trump campaign in January of 2025. This was reported. And he's got to be like beside himself now, feeling like he's been duped or turned on or whatever else, like stabbed in the back. Okay. Apple plans to move production of all iPhones sold in the U.S. to India by next year. Well, why? Because of the Trump tariffs that were going to be oppressive tariffs on China. Okay, so if there's going to be these tensions with China, we'll move to India. Okay, that'll solve it. But then we have some other problems, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Trump lashed out at Apple CEO Tim Cook and is threatening a 25% tariff on made-on-India iPhones. I've long ago informed Tim Cook of Apple that I expect their iPhones that will be sold in the United States of America will be manufactured and built in the United States, not in India or any place else, says President Trump in a scathing post on Truth Social last week. Apple has yet to respond, but if the 25% tariff is imposed, the impact on the market could be huge. Prices for the popular smartphones are likely to surge worldwide. I'll show you how that works out in just a moment. First, let's hear what Trump is saying. This was just a couple days back, and let's hear what he has to say.
American company in that way.
It would be more. It would be also Samsung and anybody that makes that product. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. So anybody that makes that product, and that'll start on, I guess.
So anyone who's making smartphones is going to be under this tariff, and that means that all your smartphones will be more expensive. I know people will say, well, yeah, but it'll be made in America. Yes. So that's good for a small percentage of factory workers, and it's bad for all consumers that it's going to be more expensive.
At the end of June, it'll come out. I think we have that appropriately done by the end of June. So if they make that product. Now, again, when they build their plant here, there's no tariff. So they're going to be building plants.
But it's far more expensive when they build their plant here, when they pay their workers here, because they have to be paid more, right? So that's the real trick. Now, there is a way that you could have incentivized Apple to come back to the United States. You could have dropped the corporate tax rate through the floor and just drop it way, way, way down and incentivize them. But instead, we're bullying because that's what we seem to be doing.
Here, but I had an understanding with him that he wouldn't be doing this. He said he's going to India to build plants. I said, that's okay to go to India, but you're not going to sell into here without tariffs. And that's the way it is. Yeah.
Why would you have an American?
What makes you confident, sir, that Apple can build in the United States at a price that American consumers?
Oh, they can. No, they can. And a lot of it's so computerized now. These plants are amazing if you look at them, but they can do that. And actually, as you know, Apple's coming in with $500 billion. So are the chip companies. We have all of the chip companies coming in. The biggest, $500 billion, $200 billion, $250 billion they're spending.
Now, if they could do it for the same price as what they can do in China, why wouldn't they? I mean, I'm sure the people at Apple are just as patriotic as anywhere else. So there's got to be some kind of cost differential or some other factor going on. And I'll show you both of those in a moment.
But we're talking about the iPhone now. And, the iPhone, if they're going to sell it in America. I want it to be built in the United States.
Analysts say
They're able to do that.
When you say that Walmart should eat the cost of the tariffs, is that an acknowledgement that it is U.S. companies that bear the brunt of tariffs, not foreign countries?
Oh, yeah. And that was just a week before this, where he was talking about, well, Walmart better not raise the prices for goods because of tariffs. They should eat the cost. Well, yeah, the cost has to go somewhere. And if if it's there are imports and which lead to tariffs, then somebody's going to pay that, and it's going to ultimately be the consumer, because even Walmart is going to have to increase their prices.
Sometimes the country will eat it. Sometimes Walmart will eat it, and sometimes there'll be something to pay, something extra.
And it's going to be something that you're going to pay, and the money goes to the government for what's coming out of the consumer's pocket.
I've been a fan, and I've always believed. And if you look, take a look at what I did 4 years ago. We had the greatest economy, and we had no inflation. Remember that. We had no inflation, and yet we had hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs that I put on China, yet we had no inflation. We had no big cost differential. Oftentimes, and I don't like it when a department store, because they'll do a lot of business, but they announce record profits and everything else. They have to take out some of their profits. They'll make a little bit less money. But I don't want the consumer. I don't want the consumer to pay.
But the consumer will pay. Like, you can't control that part.
Why impose tariffs that are hurting American businesses?
They're not hurting. They're helping, because they're creating jobs in America. We're creating tremendous amounts of jobs in America like you've never seen.
So it's helping a very small band of people who are getting these jobs, and it's hurting all consumers in the United States.
We're having investment in America. We're not getting ripped off by every country in the world. We've been ripped off by every country in the world.
Okay, there he goes again about the whole rip-off thing. Okay, let's keep continuing here. So here's Tim Cook talking about why it is that he's actually in China, and it's not just because of price. Listen
There's a confusion about China, and let me at least give you my opinion. The popular conception is that companies come to China because of low labor cost. I'm not sure what part of China they go to, but the truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. The reason
actually China outsources to Vietnam. And so there's a reason for that, because China is doing better, right?
The reason is because of the skill, the quantity of skill in one location, and the type of skill it is. Like, the products we do require really advanced tooling, and the precision that you have to have in tooling and working with the materials that we do are state of the art. And the tooling skill is very deep here,
Well, and that's because they actually implement the tooling skill there, like Apple Computer does it. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Before I do that, let's all understand that, this meme is funny because Apple products are just already expensive, right? The new MacBook accessory, only $69.99 for an escape key, right? So here's what the cost is. I just went out to Grok and I was asking, how much does an iPhone cost? It's made in China. iPhone 15, $423 for the materials. 515 plus, $442, or 523, or 558. Now, if you add the tariffs, the base model of the iPhone 16, which is $599, becomes something more along the lines of $1,142 potentially, depending on how high these tariffs are. iPhone 16 goes up to maybe $1,400, or iPhone 16 Pro Max up to $2,300 potentially with tariffs. So, okay. So now, again, let's look at these numbers, $400 to $500. The retail price in the United States is $799, $899, $999, and $1,199 if these models were made in, it's like, okay. So yeah, iPhone manufacturing costs in China, and then what the retail prices are before tariff, 7, 8, 9, and 11. And now if they're made in the United States, it's going way up. It's just got to go up. That's the reality. Now, Tim Cook was trying to evade the China issue, but here's where it connects with Russia and Ukraine, and that is that if we have these bone-crushing sanctions, Graham pushes this bill with 500% tariff on Russian oil buyers. Well, India is one of the big oil buyers. China is too, but if Tim Cook flees from China to India, he's going to be in just the same kind of bad position with Apple that he was in before, and that's going to be very bad for people that are buying Apple. Now, this is really interesting. This is a Daily Show about a week ago. Now, let's listen to this, what they're talking about, how Apple actually functions.
With 200 people, and I figured out that Apple was investing, by 2015, $55 billion a year into China. So this is mostly like they spend loads of money, billions of dollars, on machinery that they put on on production lines that are sort of orchestrated by Apple but not owned by them.
So they're building the machinery,
yeah,
but they're outsourcing that. They're hiring companies to build this.
Like like outsourcing is the word, and yet there's something so
they own the means of production with it.
They own. So I compare it to like the way Uber is the largest taxi provider in the world without owning any cars.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good analogy. Or like if you're around a Boeing plant, then there's going to be all sorts of other industry around that Boeing plant, or a General Motors plant. There's going to be other industry supporting that General Motors plant. So same kind of thing here.
It's the same thing for manufacturing.
Right.
So none of the factories are owned by Apple, and yet they have like maniacal control over the machinery within those factories.
Right.
And so they're doing, like I quote someone saying, we treat the workers like our arms and legs, like you do this and you do that. And the number of people they've trained like that is 28 million, so larger than the labor force of California.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. So maybe they're in China because it's low cost. Maybe it's because of the ability to have the trained workers. Maybe it's because you like to have the trained workers not talking back and working hard like they are in China. Maybe it's something else. So there's a number of factors going into why they're doing it, what they're doing. But the system that you have is perfectly geared to give you what you're getting. And there's a reason why they're in China. Could you just pick up and displace and come back to the United States? Not without huge, massive dislocation and huge spikes in the cost of production.
Since 2008. And the number of billions of dollars they spend on machinery is, $14 billion, I think, is the peak year. So some of that's public, and other of this material
so
is not
these documents, the numbers seem fantastical.
Of course. And yet, well, they do and they don't, right?
Right.
So 55 billion is
a year.
55 billion is per year. That's the investment. A lot of that is training costs for the employees in China. And the number of employees, like per Tim Cook's public estimate, right, is 3 million people are assembling iPhones and other Mac products in China.
But
right?
these aren't just low level, like, oh, it's a million people doing
both.
it.
Lots of unskilled jobs, the ones that Howard Lutnick wants to bring back to America.
Yes.
Yep. And lots of PhDs at Foxconn.
Right.
Really sophisticated.
Right.
But my point is, like, lots of times people think there's great vocational training in China. The vocational school in China is Apple.
They've trained all these workers.
Yes, they've done a huge job. So let me just.
So when Tim Cook was talking about why he's there, he's talking about like, well, because this is where we have him, but this is where we have maybe compliant workers who are going to do this at the right cost. And there's a number of variables that go into it. So yeah, so that's what's going on. And then I'll just leave you with this. So I'm not going to make an argument one way or another other than to say, I think this is going to raise costs, and it's going to raise costs because of the tariffs, and the tariffs are coming either because Trump wants tariffs or because Trump's going to go along with tariffs in order to punish Russia indirectly without him having to do it, but through what the Congress does. And, you just see inevitably the cost has to rise. The Made in America Great Again hat here in this meme, made in China, $50, no, $77, no, $102. That has to be. I mean, the laws of supply and demand haven't changed. Tell me what you think about what you saw here. I mean, am I off in left field, or does this make some sense to you? Put that in the comments below. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person. By the way, I normally talk about what's going on in the Ukraine-Russian war, and that's normally how I end, is saying thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. If you're interested in that, please consider subscribing. I do these update videos on Ukraine daily. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares.